let's start this
Let's
thing.
do it, yeah. Should we have a swig of coffee first?
Yeah.
In case anyone was curious, this is coffee. It says coffee on it. There's no Baileys in there.
Not yet. All right. So I'm let's play that back. I'm Ryan Brown, and this is the Unvarnished podcast, and I am in Reading, Connecticut again with Todd Casey. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for wanting to interview me and hear whatever garbage I say.
Yeah, I was here almost a year, well, exactly a year ago, almost. No, maybe a little bit longer, but I didn't have a whole lot of time at that point, but I'm glad I was able to track you down this time. We met at the Hudson River School in 2007, wasn't it?
Yeah. Do you remember the story?
I remember needing a ride to the airport, like 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was nervous. I didn't want to ask anybody. I didn't feel like I knew very many people that well. It was so out of the way. And you're like, I'll take you. And I was like, who is this guy? He's so cool. And we had a great conversation on that drive. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And because I don't think we painted together that much before then.
No.
Throughout the experience.
No, you were like rocking and rolling, and I was like, what am I doing here kind of thing.
Yeah.
I remember that, and I was like, Ryan's killing it, and we do those little get-togethers at the end and kind of have a meal and then look at everybody's studies.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I hadn't done landscape all that much. But yeah, that last day I remember nobody had cars for that thing.
Yeah.
Nobody did. And there was nothing planned on like how to get anybody to help them out. And we were in like, what was it? Not Hudson.
Hunter,
yeah. We were Hunter. And it's like in the middle of like, what is it? An hour from a drive from the interstate. And I just remember like people were like, I need to get this place. And you were like, I just need to get to Albany so I could fly home. And I was like, I could do that. Instead of heading southeast, I was going to head just east and a little bit of north. And and it was cool because you were in the other house. There was two houses. And the only time that we mingled, I think, was like when I think there was like drinks the last night.
Yeah.
So unless you saw somebody on the mountain, and I think you were like a go-getter up in the morning, then it was like you didn't really interact all that much unless you were in the house with the people.
Right.
So you had asked, you were looking for a ride, and I was like, hey, I'll drive you.
Yeah.
And then we had an awesome conversation. I remember we talked about Edwin Austin Abbey, and you were like telling me about how I think you named your daughter.
Yeah.
After. Yeah. There was a ton of overlap, but the funny part. I don't know if you remember this. You can totally edit this out if it's too weird, but you forgot my name, and at the end you just said thanks, Josh, and I was like,
oh no,
and I was like, that's actually a good guess because there was like 3 Joshes there.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was just funny because I was like, it just showed that like we hadn't chatted at all, and It totally was a memorable experience. I remember you were talking about the Abbey the
volume
2 series.
Yeah, right.
So I think I went back.
I haven't
after.
stopped talking about that. I think everyone I talked to, I mentioned that biography. It's so good.
Well, I went back and I bought them. And
did you get originals?
I got
such a beautiful printing.
Yeah, one of the 2. Yeah, and they're like. I scoured eBay one night and was just like, I'll buy it for $100.
Yeah.
But absolutely gorgeous and an artist that not a lot of people talk about enough.
Yeah.
The Met has the scene with it's the Macbeth.
Macbeth. Yep.
Yeah.
Massive
painting. Massive painting, and before Madame X, that was like the painting that the Met had acquired as their painting, but.
And
But
that I should say, just for anyone that's watching this, it's a 2-volume set biography on Edwin Austin Abbey, written by E.V. Lucas, and you can still get originals. I think it's published in 1921, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a beautiful publishing. They actually press in some of the images into the pages, and it puts you in that world. Where, I mean, it talks about his first meeting with Whistler. It talks about moving to England, and it talks about, they built the largest studio ever constructed in England for he and Sargent when they did the Boston Public Library murals. And then when they finished the murals, they dismantled it.
Yeah.
And it talks about how Sargent was on his deathbed. He had gone swimming in a river. He dove in and gouged his head on a submerged spike. And Edwin Austin Abbey rowed upriver and collected him and brought him back down to Broadway and nursed him back to health. And that's where he painted Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose. And it was the son and the daughter, I think, of Millais, who was the painter who died on the Titanic. And it's like this whole interactive world that it paints for you. It's just one of the best biographies I've ever read. So yeah, it had a huge impact on me, and I always mention it because it's so good. But yeah, what I remember is, and this was similar last night when I was talking to Jen, like I had one conversation with her at the Portrait Society. I don't even remember which year. And it was in a group, Justin Hess was there and Alicia Ponzio. And, but I remember, her and I in this group just kind of like locked in this conversation about what, I don't know, but it was so good that we were immediately friends and forever friends, even though I haven't even seen her since then, you know?
I haven't seen you since then either.
Yeah. And so, but the one conversation I had with you, the one conversation I had with her, I'll forever hold that. And like, I consider both of you close friends, even though I almost never see you.
Yeah. And when we chat on the phone, it's just like, wow, I could chat for hours. But yeah, I think it's just that there's just so much overlap and so much to talk about. And you're open-minded about this stuff. I find some people, like we talked about illustration.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's a lot of people even in the realist art world that don't want to go there. And they're like, no, the door kind of closes after 19th century French academic.
Yeah.
Even the Impressionists don't even talk about them.
Yeah.
And for me, I always came at it as like, I just love it all.
Yeah.
Like, Mead Schaefer, Dean Cornwall, those guys. Yeah. Like, if you're not studying that stuff, I mean, that's beautiful artwork.
Yeah, I mean, from a craft standpoint, it has everything you'd want. In terms of brushwork and layering and drawing, the thing that I think it attracts me the most is the storytelling. I don't know why it's denigrated. It's never made sense to me. I think, when you get into some of the maybe J.C. Leyendecker, some of Norman Rockwell's work, it can start to tip over to more stylized, cartoony, if you want to use that word. But I went to Rockwell's show when it was at the Guggenheim in 2001. And it was after we'd visited like so many different museums. We'd been to Philadelphia, we'd been to the Delaware, the Brandywine, National Gallery, and then up to the Guggenheim and the Met as well. And looking around at that sort of at that retrospective, I thought like Norman Rockwell could paint anything in any way he wanted. There was one of was Huck Finn whitewashing a fence, and it was like a Monet. It was like painted in this really sort of broken colorway, and then you had this sort of George Bellows boxing painting, and I mean, he was so broad in his ability and so brilliant at pinpointing these pivotal points in a narrative.
Yeah.
And the 19th century paintings that I gravitate towards have that similar storytelling in it. The Dagnan Bouverie of the little boy, with like that dusting of snow on the ground, and he's like this sort of homeless kid on the street, or the Ferdinand Pelez in the Petit Palais of the old woman breastfeeding, and her kids, I mean, destitute on the street. I mean, those are maybe you could call those genre scenes, but there's a lot of narrative to that. And there's a Jean-Geoffroy de Gioux in the Musée d'Orsay. I think it's called Visiting Day. And it's a father visiting his sick son in the hospital. And it's just like the power of that.
With the Friant, right? At the Musée d'Orsay.
Right.
I think the funeral scene.
Yeah.
Where they're like walking past the homeless person.
Yeah.
With their black coats on.
That is okay. So that's at the Met, and I didn't know. It was January. I saw that painting. I've seen it a million times in books. Right?
Yeah,
I love it. All the characters are amazingly well painted, but I'd never seen it in person. It hadn't been out.
It's at the Met.
Yeah, it's we're holding candles. It's just a sort of procession.
Oh no, not the Dagnan Bouverie, the Friant.
You're right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a great one.
The Friant I haven't seen in person. That hasn't been out at the Musée d'Orsay.
Really?
Yeah.
That was like the gem when I went there. It was like on the third floor, and it was like this huge scene. Yeah. And I was like, no one except for Travis Schlott had ever talked about Emile Friant, and he had the book in French.
Okay.
And I just, when I saw it, I think like you probably did the similar things back in the day when you had access to a thing, and you're like, I'm probably never going to see this thing again.
Yeah.
I stayed up like all night studying it, and then I took pictures of everything because I was like, I need to study this more.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with that book. But it wasn't until I went there and saw, and I was like, how come no one talks about Emile Friant?
Yeah, unbelievable. But the power, so sorry, the reason you were saying they were walking past a homeless guy, it made me think of the Dagnan Bouverie in the Met, because I had never seen that one in person.
Gorgeous.
And I had never noticed the beggars, because they're sort of small. They're in the middle of the canvas, but I never noticed them, and I it was so powerful in the sense that the deliberate way that he painted them, he lowered the color contrast. He made them really gray and muted, and all of the figures, the religious figures, or not religious, but the figures that were in the religious procession were painted with so much more color and
much more intense.
Yeah, and I thought that was a deliberate choice to minimize them. And for me, we all bring our own experience to this, but I relatively recently kind of found my way out of religion, and so for me that was so powerful, because downtown Salt Lake City, you have this mega church that's worth billions and billions and there's a massive homeless problem, and it's the overlooking of the needy and the hypocrisy, I feel like, of that, the preaching versus the actions, and the way that this procession was just totally oblivious to these beggars was so powerful.
That's the vertical one, right? The vertical. Yeah. Such an interesting composition too. To have done it vertical and not, because you have a line of people coming in, and to not do it horizontally. I love that painting, and Gabriel Weisberg, who wrote Against the Modern, the Dagnan Bouverie book, who kind of brought him to light.
I think that's on. No, that's not on the cover. It's a different.
I remember the one that is, but it's like amazing that, again, people don't know who he is. He would have been huge, but he came later. I think he died in like 1920. And phenomenal painter. I think that sort of what I left thinking was, after I'd seen the Dagnan Bouverie, was I need to have that level of purposefulness in my work. I need to really give it
thought, and it kind of smacked me in the face that I hadn't been doing that enough. You know, I look around at some of my paintings, and at first it was just about like trying to figure out how to paint, you know, so beyond the landscape, how can I now paint a figure in a landscape, and how can I integrate those so that they feel like they're being lit by the same source? How can I,
how can you make a picture?
Yeah. How do you make a picture? And so, but it was combining all these different elements, that I had to tackle first. And now I'm realizing like, I'd like to have more of a reason beyond just pretty girl, nice outfit in a nice setting, in a nice pose. You know, why is she there? What is she doing? What is, you know, I want to think about every aspect of the picture, and everything that I include should have a reason and a narrative. I want to know the prequel to the painting. I want to know the, you know, the, what comes after. Why this moment?
I think this is why we connected so well too on that, because I feel like, oh yeah, this is like our conversation when I drove you to Albany. You know, it was almost like divine intervention to be like, how come this guy and I didn't chat the whole time?
Yeah,
like he needs a ride, and here we are. I talk about this all the time. You know, Joseph Campbell talks about it too. The symbol without the meaning.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of where we are when I look at pictures these days. Is just things.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting article that was put out by the New York Times, I think about a year ago, and it was a picture of a old Dutch still life painting. I think it's Heda Kleist, and it's called A Messy Table. And it's kind of the way in which I think people make work now, which is just like get a bunch of cool stuff. You know, some of it's visceral, like let's get a Romer glass, make it look like a reenactment of some old Dutch still life. But if you dig into what that painting is, it's actually called a map of the world, and everything is symbolic in it. Mm-hmm. So it's like our quick read in 2023 is just that they're just things. Yeah. But for them, it was like some of those, and this is like what we witness when we go to a museum, the best of the best. Yeah. Right. Deep work. And I think a little bit more of that. It sounds like that's kind of where you're going with your work too, and that's where I was with mine, of like just a shell and a pear next to each other, and I'm like, I don't know how to paint either of these two things. I'll put them together and try to make a painting. But now it's like you've learned the instrument. Now we want to make symphonies. You know,
right? Yeah, and symphonies with
deep
a
meaning,
story,
connection.
and the story is, I think the difficult thing for me is trying to figure out what is meaningful to me and how to put that in visual form. Yeah. I dream in movies, almost, right? That there's a very linear quality to my dreams. Not always, but and I think I'm not making movies. I'm trying to take like a moment of a movie and pick out the most poignant still from that and paint that. But what are those narratives that mean something to me? I've painted my kids quite a bit, and I'm kind of slowly working on a series of called New Discoveries of like kid firsts, right? The first one I did was my daughter looking up and seeing a hummingbird for the first time. And now I'm finishing one where she sees a butterfly for the first time. It's these little magical moments in a kid's life where they experience things for the first time. And that's been important. But beyond that, it's trying to really figure myself out, and just this weird journey I'm on, and the way I was raised very religious, and now kind of I have a different path, and what does that mean, and how do I feel about it, and what's my interaction with my kids and family and the world around me, and again, like how do I take all this philosophy and life experience and pick out the moments that are the most important and make make pictures out of those.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best thing I could do as an artist. And then I have the struggle of having to monetize the work at the same time, which for me is a sort of block. And it's a self-imposed block, right? I mean, I feel this deep responsibility for being the provider.
Yeah.
And so I have to look at it practically and say, well, my landscapes sell a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And so I find myself doing those pot boiler paintings that I still care about. I still, put as much as I can into them, but they're not the grand narratives. And then you go see the Emile Friants and you see the Dagnan Bouverets and the L'Ermites, and you get this reminder. It's this little knife in your side that's like, you're not doing that yet. And I feel that sort of craving to follow that, but I haven't really solved that problem yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Look, if we look back, I mean, it sounds, again, kindred spirits. I'm always battling that same thing. I do cocktail paintings.
Yeah.
I love to do cocktail paintings.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I did them was because I didn't just want to do boring still lifes.
Yeah.
Like I need to work out all the problems. I can put a little bit of a narrative in it. If I got a cocktail like a Bloody Mary, it's kind of like, well, what goes in a Bloody Mary? What's the garnish?
Yeah.
And then you kind of search for that information. There's nothing deep about it,
Yeah.
It's just, it sounds like that's kind of like where you are. You love doing the landscape. You know that they sell really well. But then on the flip side, it's like there's a desire for more meaningful work.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. I mean, that's where it's like, we're both teachers, and that's where I'm like trying to put that seed in the student right away of like, don't think of this later.
Yeah.
Because if not, you may just become the cocktail painter.
Right.
And perhaps that's where you want to be, but that's also a double-edged sword because galleries now want that. That's how they see you.
Yeah, it's
Or not just galleries, people.
People. I think it's in our culture to want to pigeonhole people. I don't want to see The Rock play Macbeth. I don't want to hear Snoop's country album.
Yeah.
I want Snoop to play the rapper,
Yeah.
And I think that, and then in terms of selling your work, I think it's wise to brand yourself if you're wanting consistency in sales, because now people know, well, this is the guy that does this. They know what to expect.
Yeah.
And then I've had this conversation with several artists about, this narrative idea, doing narrative paintings. And the response I get, I've had it mostly with like the people that I trained academically with, those friends. And the response is typically, there's not a market for that. People aren't buying that work. And my response is, and I don't know what's right or wrong. But my response is, how could there be an audience for something that doesn't exist? I mean, I don't know very many painters that are trying to do narrative paintings like Dean Cornwell, Harvey Dunn, Howard Pyle, Dagnan Bouverets, any of those guys. And maybe you could talk about it in terms of genre scenes. Like Max Ginsberg certainly has done a lot of multi-figurative, more social realism. Bert Silverman has done a lot of more genre scenes. And I've talked to other artists as well, and they say, well, that work is so dated. And I think, well, good. I mean, they painted their time.
Yeah.
If it doesn't look like it's from a certain time, then it's not telling the specific story of their life in that moment, right?
Yeah.
So the dated argument, I don't necessarily subscribe to, because I think it should be dated for some purposes, right?
I totally agree.
But the question of whether or not you can build a strong collector base for narrative painting, I'm not sure about that one, because I haven't really tried yet. And if you're going to do narrative or multi-figure painting, representational painting, it better be Western. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is there any other huge market that exists at the moment other than that? And even living in the West, I I've had plenty of experiences, on ranches or there's plenty of cowboys around me and there's plenty of that kind of thing. But I haven't. It's just I even grew up reading Louis L'Amour. I love Western stories. I love Western stories. But when I've designed a couple of Western paintings, it just feels inauthentic to me. And I mean, that's totally personal to me. I like it. I know a lot of other people that have, dove into the Western world and they're doing great work.
I think authenticity, right? Even Max talks about that a lot.
Yeah.
Where it's like doing honest work.
Yeah.
If you talk to Max, he's going to bring up social realism. Of course he's going to paint it.
Yeah.
And I definitely get the idea of like, do you want to just tap into a market because it's big? And some people come at it that way. But I think, sounds like you and I are in similar journeys, like just making meaningful stuff. And I also think part of this is like a perception thing. Like I think we perceive Max as making a lot of money doing it, right? Or having a fantastic life, and maybe it's because he's sold a lot of work, and it's like we don't quite know what the numbers on anybody are.
Sure.
But like when I started to dig into that kind of conversation, because I was always thinking like financially, like I'm going to do this. I know I'm going to do it. I can't not do it.
Yeah.
But it's like, do I want to mortgage my life and everything else that I want for it? And I think that was where I was like, it can't be. It's got to be a balance because I want a wife and kids. And,
sure.
But, when I looked at like Thomas Eakins, he sold like 26 paintings in his life. 26.
Wow.
That's like insane, right? And I
That's
think I read it on the
really-
back of a DVD.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like or not a DVD, it was a VHS. Because I used to go to the New York Public Library and take the videos out, and they used to have the Robert Beverly Hale lectures.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I just ended up like ripping it somehow, just so I was like, I can't believe there's like Robert Beverly Hale with a shaky camera in black and white that I can watch. But anyway, I think part of it is like there's a perception that like Bert Silverman's amazing. He must make a ton of money doing what he's doing, and he has this market. And I think they're like, the perception is that we love his work and we think he does well. And I think blissfully, some people just make the work that they want, don't care about the financial side, and then they put it out, and then a lot of artists love it. So I think that's a part of it.
Yeah, it is. That perception of financial success is a weird one, and I think
look at Van Gogh. I mean, like,
right.
A lot of people love Van Gogh, and I know a lot of like people in the realist world hate him. Right? I absolutely love him from an emotional side of painting.
Right.
But it's like he wasn't what Van Gogh was now. Like if you asked anybody, like, give me three names, you'd be like Picasso, Van Gogh, and Monet. Right. And like he didn't make much money at all when he was painting. He was suffering, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's what impresses me most about Van Gogh is how his passion never failed in the face of such huge obstacles. And I mean, I look at Van Gogh, like he was painting at the same time as Bouguereau and Sargent and like Messinier and these monsters
of Homer.
Yeah, I mean, like, and he couldn't get into the academy, and technically he wasn't really that good, but passion wise, he had such a particular voice, and what resonates with me with Monet is the love. And this artistic integrity to what he was doing that I'd rather see that with maybe a little bit lesser execution than perfect execution without passion.
Right. I think Hawthorne said you have to see the love in the thing that you're painting. How are you going to convey that to the audience if you don't have it? And I think it's important. I think for the perception thing too, that like if you're ever I don't know if you. I read. I love to read. Like Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm reading Big Magic right now. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah. I read that. Yeah.
She's talking about even in the same way that like before Eat, Pray, Love, she had written 3 novels. She was still working a day job.
So yeah, that's interesting because it's actually something I was going to talk to you about because it made me think of you. I talked to Howard Ray's Gallery.
Yeah, I love Howard. I love the whole family.
Yeah, just recently, and I'm hoping to work with them a little bit more. But he said, he always encouraged his artists not to have to rely on their.
He
art.
said to me, "Don't quit your day job."
Yeah, don't quit your day job. And for me, I went the opposite direction when I first started out because I just had to be all in.
Yeah.
It was so hard and it took so long to just be consistent. And I mean, it's never consistent, but it was really, really difficult. But that, for me, that's what I needed to just keep
Jump
going.
right in. Yeah.
But then I read the Big Magic and she said, she didn't quit until Eat, Pray, Love was published. And, and it was like, and then I knew that you had been working right in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll tell you the story of how I came into Ray's. A buddy of mine, Rodney Davis, was in the gallery. He showed, because he's with Anthony Wachulis and like Wachulis' school. And they would have like one or two, I think one group show a year. And he was like, come check out the show. And I looked in the gallery. I was like, it seems awesome. And I was at 59th Street. They're at 57th.
Yeah.
On Madison Ave. So I was like, it's so close to me.
Yeah.
And at that time at 59th and Madison, I probably shouldn't say this, but that's where Ralph Lauren headquarters are. So I was working as a graphic designer because after I finished my training, I didn't have a lot of money. I was like, I got to go work because, the bigger picture is that my wife and I want to buy a house and we want to have a family. And she's not going to carry the load herself. So I have to provide something. And like a year later, we bought a house, and you need to show some kind of finance. Sure. You can't just go and be like, here's my Schedule C or 1099s.
Yeah.
They'll be like, no, because then they want like 5 years of like back to see how much you're making. It's like,
2008 ruined that, right?
Yeah, it killed everything with the art market. But yeah, so like I remember going over there, and Gina and I, she worked at Polo too. That's where we met. We went over for lunch once, and we just kind of checked out the gallery, and we're just like, it's so close. So I ended up being like a wallflower.
Yeah.
I went in there so much, and I was like, this would just be a good move. It's close. Like it's right there. I can bring in paintings, because the other part of it is the back and forth between shipping and then framing and then shooting, and the cost that comes out of our pocket before we can even sell a painting. Yeah. So I thought, I'll just bring stuff in. Well, let's see if they're interested. And Howard called me. I remember it was like, I think it was around like January, and he said like, come on in and bring your painting. I'd sent him this narrative painting of Shackleton because I loved the Endurance, the book, and I was like, it's a great way to just kind of start to make paintings off of and I love to read. And I brought that in, and they all stopped what they were doing. This is what I love about Ray's Gallery. They all stopped what they were doing, and it's not from like an ego standpoint, because I had worked with other galleries, and they're just like, yeah, just send what you got. And didn't care. But this one, they stopped what they were doing for like an hour. We just sat there and chatted about art and everything, and I was just like, you guys like make me feel special. Like you guys care. They all stopped to come in this one room and chat about the paintings I brought in. And then from there, it just has been a fantastic working relationship. And the whole time it was polo during the day to make my money. And then at night I would just paint. Yeah. But it was like blissfully like not having to care about the financial side.
Yeah, I remember you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were saying that you'd come home, have dinner with the family, then start painting at 9 till like midnight or 1, and then get up, go into the city, because you're living in Connecticut, right?
Well, at that time I was in New York, and then yeah, that's pretty much what would happen. There was no way, and you know this too, even if tomorrow you're like, I got to get a job and I'm going to work whatever you're going to do, I'll be a mailman, right? you'd still paint. And that's kind of like where I was early in my career. I was actually a mailman for a year of my life, and I took painting out to see if I could take it out.
Yeah.
And it didn't last long. And I just had that point. It's very much like why Elizabeth Gilbert's book was fascinating to me. I was like, I tried to take it out, and I couldn't, and I knew I had to do it in some form. And that's the promise she had to herself, which is just, I'm just going to write.
Yeah.
Like, eventually it's going to lead somewhere, but I'm not going to put these big ideas of, like, I have to have a solo show by the age of 25 and do grand paintings. She did it. I think I did it similar to the way she did. So Gina and I would wake up at 6 o'clock. We would get on the train at about 7:15, get into Manhattan about 8:45, walk to Polo at 9, work from 9 to 5:30, get the train home to be home about 7. Gina would go cook. I would start to do like a quick painting, like either like an alla prima or do the drawing and then try to get it into a grisaille, go eat dinner. Gina would go to bed at 9 o'clock every day, and then I would just go, like, see if I could knock out a painting. And that's where the cocktails were just like quick narratives that I didn't have to really think about, but they were, I always call it purple cow, like Seth Godin, which is like take something that you normally see, like everybody does, like fruit, right?
Sure.
Mine are fruit with a narrative twist.
Yeah.
That's it. It was just like, I can put some oranges in there, and I'm still working on like color and composition, but it's slightly different from what other people are doing. And it was, I like to have a cocktail every once in a while, so it was kind of like, this is cool. Plus it gives you a big thing to kind of, I could keep going with this. Like the narratives were just always there, almost like, Ryan, go do like a Stephen King novel, and you're like, there's 1,000 of them, and you're like, you'll have no problem finding something to paint then.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was with that. Like a zombie, it's like right away, it's like a lot of things come to mind. You could do tiki paintings. And that's where like I started to bring them into Ray's, and then he sold one like the first week, and then he sold another one, and then he was like, just keep doing them. Yeah. So I came to them with the idea, and then they now are like, we love your cocktail paintings, and we've kind of done a lot of shows. And the cocktail book came out because I ended up doing a cocktail and painting book with James Waller and Christine Sismondo, which came out of other projects, but I was just like very open-minded to them.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I worry that I wouldn't have had that same discipline. A
lot of people burn out. And that's what my friends would say.
It's so much work.
They'd come home at 9 and be like, I want to have a beer and go to bed. And that's what they would do. And I was like, I don't watch TV. I mean, I love sports, and I'll always have it on in the background. But like, if you force yourself to get into a habit like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because if not, you'll have this creative need that you just can't. I mean, like Polo hit a lot of the creative side, but I'd also think of my painting the whole day. So when it came time to get home, I'd execute,
Wow.
I needed all that time. And I'd sleep on the train both ways to kind of catch up, because it was always like a little run down because of that. But I was like, it's the only way to make this person happy, which is paint.
Yeah. I have a niece that she was talking the other, this is maybe 2 months ago, but she was sharing all these ideas and dreams and whatever. And it just kind of occurred to me that what most people, it's very easy to have a vision board. It's very easy to have, to write down a list of goals. And there's plenty of books that'll tell you how important that is.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people are maybe missing is the to-do list that gets you to the accomplishment of the goals, right? Mm-hmm. And it's in the doing that you get where you want to go. I mean, daydreaming is great and super important. You kind of setting a path for yourself mentally and having these desires to achieve certain things or accomplish certain things. But the doing is really difficult, and to have the discipline and the motivation to really bet on yourself and do the difficult things, it's so much easier not to do it. and especially when it's this creative thing that may work and may not, may find an audience, maybe it won't. There's no guarantee in what we do, whether you're songwriting or writing novels or painting or whatever. There's no guarantee, and so the love of it has to overcome the innate laziness. It has to overcome the inevitable frustrations. It has to overcome the fear and self-loathing. And it's impressive, and that's where I kind of mentioned this with Jen last night. It was just like there's such an understanding and a solidarity when I talk to artists, because I know what you went through. I mean, I don't have the exact same path, but I know how hard it is to do this, and there's an immediate admiration for the people that have bet on themselves that way, and I just love to hear that story because it is so different and so much the same.
Yeah, for sure. Part of what you said, I always have like a bunch of ideas right when you say things, and I'm like, oh man. Here's one. Mark Twain said that the man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read, right? And I think of it like kind of like what you're saying with the to-do list. It's a list.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you did it. It just means you made a list. And in the doing is really where everything is. So whatever motivates you to do it, like if the list is like you put all your energy into just making the to-do list and then you don't paint. It's like having a book that you're like, oh yeah, I have the biography of Abby and I've never read it, but I forgot it. And it's like, no, like these are references and you should go through them and you should go and make it a habit, whatever it is.
Yeah.
An hour a day. That's why I think like the daily painters, like that kind of approach, I kind of like. But I also think sometimes it's just like, I wish they'd push it a little bit more, or like have another layer of deeper work, but there's nothing wrong with just getting in there and just like exercising, doing it. The other thing I thought of is there's a book, I forget the name of the author, but it's called The Death of the Artist. Did you ever read that one? Mm-mm. Fantastic book. And he basically, Josh, I forget the name of him, but he basically goes in and he talks to just creatives and he's just like, they're all mortgaging everything for their career. And he's like, and I think it's a perception thing that most people think that everybody, like we see on Instagram and you're like 100,000 followers or 200,000 or 1 million or whatever. And it's like, it's all part of the fake perception that person has made it. It's just they just have a lot of followers, or they know some way to tap into the algorithm, which is another part of it. And people do that just for the perception,
Well, it's interesting because there's two things I thought about as we were talking. One plays to what we were talking about earlier, which is authenticity, and it's I was kind of talking about, this is slightly off topic, but I'll come back. It's the idea that the art has to be purely authentic to your life experience or whatever. Some people are getting into Western painting and maybe that's slightly inauthentic. I feel like I gave that perception, and I wanted to clarify that I think authenticity is relative to what your goals are. And I think that if your goals are to make money and be popular, I don't even have a problem with that, because at least you're honest about it. I think that that just comes with a different set of parameters. It requires a little bit more marketing, a little bit more paying attention to social media and algorithms and putting together these cool videos and whatever. And so maybe you spend a little bit more time doing that. And again, if that's your goal, I have no problem with people honestly pursuing whatever it is that motivates them. And money is a necessary reality to continuing to do what we do. So I just wanted to clarify, I'm on board with anybody who's doing something creative, whatever they're doing, and whatever their authentic path is. But also to go back to what you were just saying, if I can remember my train of thought, What were you saying? Remind me.
Which one? I said about Mark Twain and kind of having basically like looking around, saying like you have the books there, but just because you have them doesn't mean you read them. And the other one was Perception.
Perception, yes.
The Death of the Artist. Fantastic book, by the way.
Yeah. The perception, I think, is a big one because all art is perception. The value of art is pure perception. Like there's no standards. Even though I'm come from a sports background and I wish it was more of a meritocracy, it's definitely not. And
Say from a sports background?
Yeah.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, I just like if the art world were the NBA,
Right.
I would have the $40 million contract,
Right.
and because people like the way that I miss.
Well,
Right?
there's
People
even
like the style that I throw the ball out of bounds, or
but there's
whatever.
even like in that analogy, like Isaiah Thomas has all the chops to be able to be making 40 mil.
Yeah.
He said, "Bring the Brinks truck," right?
Yeah.
And he can't get a contract in the NBA,
Right.
so even that has a little bit of unfairness to it as
Right.
well. But anyway,
Yeah, but
love
as much
the
as it's,
basketball analogy.
I can't get away from them. But as much as I want it to be a meritocracy, and I understand that it's not, I then understand that the value is pure perception, and so I've talked to a lot of like gallery owners about this. I've talked to a lot of artists about this, and I'm really confused. So I'll throw this idea by you and see what you think. My idea is that there's a massive chasm between the value of the contemporary, modern, abstract art market and the representational art market. We're talking maybe, I'm going to throw out numbers, but they're not accurate. But like the representational art market is worth 1% of the total value of the art market globally. And that's because the way that the marketing machine presents the contemporary market, contemporary in this context meaning abstract, conceptual, whatever, is so much more powerful and active, and they promote artists, not art. And the representational market acts more like a furniture store in that they wait for you to walk in, pick out what you want, and help you load it in the car. But they don't necessarily tell you why it's important. They don't tell you the background of the artist. They don't necessarily tell you, everything behind the art. But if you're going to sell a banana taped to a wall for $100,000, you have to really tell people why that's important. Why you have to sell it. And I just don't see that idea of controlling the perception of value in the representational art market in the same way as they do in the modern art market. And I think that's a huge mistake. And they're missing out on tens of millions of dollars. And the support that would mean for artists to maybe dive into more meaningful work, to not have to necessarily pander to the simplest sale, or like to do a simple still life or a simple landscape or something that's easily digestible, just so that you can keep the lights on. I think it's a huge mistake and a missed opportunity that they're not looking at the example of the contemporary world and saying, how do we mimic that and help better support our artists? Because what we do is so much easier to recognize by a general audience as something that has value relative to like something that can't be done by the average person. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when you watch players in the NBA, you're not sitting at home thinking, I'm good for 15 points on that team. I mean, you have those armchair quarterbacks that are gonna think that, But when you go see it in person, I mean, it's why everybody loves the Olympics, right? We love to see human achievement. We love to glorify these like people that have dedicated their lives to a thing and gotten so good. And the work that a lot of representational painters are doing is clearly that. It's clearly something that has taken a huge amount of dedication.
Yep.
And the general public knows that. And so it should be easier to sell something like that at a higher value because everybody can see that it do you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
and so
absolutely.
that's something that I'm curious about. Why the representational art market hasn't figured that out?
Yeah, no, it brings just a good flurry of ideas. Like, in the NBA, there's 300 or 400 players across all the teams. 15 players, 26 teams, let's say 400, and like the bench player for the Celtics, that's my team, would destroy any of us. Like when I played high school ball for 4 years, and one of our coaches was, he was like the 16th guy, last one cut off the 86 or 85 Celtics.
Oh my gosh.
And he would just go in there and like not even warm up and just launch a three, like looking like Steph Curry, and swish it.
Yeah.
So the rotation on the ball, and it reminds me of Brian Scalabrine. He made this funny because he always gets, he's the white mamba, right?
Yeah.
He was like a kind of role player. He was actually pretty good on the Nets, but he was a role player on the Celtics when they won in '08.
Yeah.
And he gets crap all the time because people think like, oh, I beat Brian Scalabrine 1-1, and you're like, you would not even get close.
Just a big, slow redhead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know why is that guy in the NBA.
Yeah.
Somebody must have got him in the back door, and it's like, he said something like, I'm closer to LeBron than you are to me.
Right.
And it's true because like we see this and we're like, Stoico Vrankovic, a guy who used to play for the Celtics, and you're like, how'd that guy get on the team? Is like, that guy is solid.
Yeah.
If you played him 1-on-1, he'd destroy you.
He's a killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the amount of hours you put in and the dedication. Like, we did this Zion painting retreat in October, and Travis Schlott came, and there was, where we were staying, there was an LDS church right across the street. So I called ahead and I'm like, hey, is there a night they play basketball? And
he's amazing. Like, he played NCAA.
Right. He played Division I.
Yep.
So I wrote him and I'm like, hey, just bring some shoes because maybe we'll shoot around a little bit. And
he was playing pro ball for France, I think, not too long ago, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, he's legit. He legit.
He was in the Final Four with. He used to bunk with Michael Olowokandi.
Yeah, and he played against Steve Nash and Jason Kidd, and I mean, he is legit. And so, like, one night, we'd painted all day and retired, and they're making dinner, and I'm like, hey, they're playing tonight. Can we go? Please just come shoot with me.
I see it.
And though immediately I saw a different level. It's the way the basketball went through the hoop.
Yeah.
You can see, like you said, the rotation, the way it hit the net was different. And I saw from like the second shot, I'm like, okay. I just wanted to see it though, because we'd talked about basketball, and
Travis and I get together. That's what we talk about.
I love it, and I'd talk a little trash to him, and he'd talk trash back to me. But I'd never actually seen him play.
Well, you're 6'3", 6'4", right?
6'3", yeah. And I couldn't touch Travis, but we played a little bit. It was crappy basketball. It was a bunch of young kids, but it was the highlight of the trip for me, just because I got to combine like my love of painting, my appreciation for him as a painter, with now like I get to bond with him over this other thing, which I don't know many artists that are like sports people that have that background, but
Absolutely.
But again, like seeing him shoot was like there's a recognition of that like, level.
Oh yeah,
like you've shot the ball 100,000 more times than me in your college days, right? I mean, the experience that you have is so much deeper than mine, and I know it from the first time I watch you put the ball up.
I think it's similar to the way in which when people watch us probably do a demo,
and
they're like, how did you just put it in the right place the first time? We were like, how did you just like, you didn't even do a drawing first. You just went for it, and you're like, 10,000, paintings ago, they were terrible.
Yeah.
Right. Malcolm Gladwell, who is another guy who
Right.
used to write full time, I think, for like one of the big magazines, and he didn't quit his day job either.
Yeah.
Did you ever what was it, the show that they came, not the show, the series that you could pay for, 2020 was big.
The Masterclass.
Yeah, Masterclass.
Yeah.
I watched his, and he did this. He said the same thing, which is just like, all these people that are super successful had other things going on.
Yeah.
Because they didn't jump in. Not to say anything bad about jumping in. You jumped in. My old teacher, Bill Maughan, jumped in too, because he had like 5 kids, and he was like, I just had to make it work.
Right.
But I think everybody's different in like their approach to it.
Yeah. It just takes a dedication. No matter what your path is, you have to be willing to go through the clumsiness. I was talking to Jen about this last night, and it's, you can't avoid the clumsiness. You can't avoid the failures. Success is found through the failures. And I'm actually slowly writing a book now, and one of the things I'm talking about is that failure is something we talk about a lot. It's a term that we use, and I think it's misused. Mm-hmm. It's overused. I think, especially as painters, we talk about little failures and, the crappy paintings being failures. And I really think that there's only 2 ways to fail, and that is 1, by not trying, and 2, by quitting. Mm-hmm. Because every single thing you do, whether good or bad, it brings you greater understanding and experience. Yep. And there's no bad choices. You're just sifting through all of the potential choices to find the ones that work best in the situation that you're in. As a parent, I look at it the same way. I can't look back and say I did that wrong, or I screwed up here, or whatever. I just, in the moment, I'm trying to do the best that I can, and it's in the doing that success is found. Yeah. What we have, this sort of idea, this sort of false idea of what success means. Maybe some people tie it to money. Maybe some people tie it to the quality of their painting, and they hold that up to whatever standards they might have. And I think that success really is that you get up in the morning and you do the thing that you really want to do, mm-hmm. And you get better at it over time, and that you develop a greater sense of discipline, and that you give yourself more opportunity by being willing to do the hard things. Mm-hmm. That you expand your way of thinking, that you're constantly making an effort to improve. That to me is success. Whatever the other outcomes are, whether they're, you have this great financial windfall, or you become super popular on Instagram or whatever, there's not very many ways to fail if you're constantly doing. Yeah. And I think that it would be good for people to shed this idea that crappy paintings are failures. They're not. They're
lead
steps.
To something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I say it all the time, to my students that, I do the little poster studies, and I'm always like, for me, it's just a quick little study, usually a half hour to an hour, and it's just a little, like a poster idea that you can kind of see it from across the room. It's not detailed. But it's the idea worked out, the first start of the idea. Yeah. And there's a graveyard up there in my studio of all the bad ideas that people get to sift through. I'm not going to hide it. If you want to come over and look at my studio, they're there. And there's plenty of bad ones, but the bad ones don't make it past that first round. Yeah. Like that's where the death of them are. And there was a writer, I've never been able to find the quote, but a friend said it to me, and maybe I could even just quote my friend. But he said, they asked a writer, why do you rewrite the same story 4 times? And he's like, I wouldn't write something bad twice, And it's kind of that idea for me of like working out the idea. If you get to the end result, you did a couple studies and you still love it, you're going to do it. Yeah. Like you are in it. And it's not a question of how much time is it going to take. It's now like you're dedicated to that idea and you can't wait to get it out. And Travis Scott, back to him, love one of his quotes. He said, and he used to have this on his studio wall. He said, do the paintings you'd want to see on your wall because they're probably going to end up there.
Yes, I quote that all the time.
So good. I actually have a
It's
picture
true.
of him like pointing at it in the studio.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
it's
it.
so true. Yeah, I used to, when I saw that, I said it all the time too, because it makes you like, if you don't. He said this at this October thing. He said, "If I don't find it interesting, how can I expect anyone else to find it
Yeah.
interesting?"
It's just like the Hawthorne quote.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that brings you back to just being really authentic, right?
Yeah, like why are you doing it?
Yeah, I have to really be interested. Now, your graveyard probably has a bunch of things that for you were ideas. The conception of the idea you really liked.
Yep.
And then as it kind of materialized, you didn't like it as much. But I could probably go up there and pick out 100 that I love, right?
Yeah.
And so it's but if you would have like pushed it just wouldn't have worked, because for you there's something about it that wasn't as exciting
Yep.
as when you first put it down on the page. And so yeah, I mean, like we were talking about before we started this, you were with Max and he did a thing and he's like, he hated it, he was going to wipe it out, and you're like, can I take that? So there's even value in the things that we think
Absolutely.
aren't working.
Well, and there's just like every other mythology or story, with death comes life, right? So there's a rebirth out of it. And that idea, that seed, whatever it is, kind of like what you're saying, every failure, if we want to say that, leads to something. And
Yeah.
all those deaths have been seeds. The
Yeah.
lotus flower has come out of them to push me somewhere else. And I thank them for, I mean, nobody goes in their studio and just every time cranks out a good painting.
Right.
Travis, who we both love, plus I'm sure he had some duds.
Yeah, sure.
But
I mean, it's like I heard Jordan Peterson say it, and I it stood out to me because I was sharing the same message with my son.
Yeah.
And it's basically like, you may not know exactly the direction you want to go, whether that's with painting or life or whatever. But you can't stand still and wait for it to come to you. If you're just take the forward steps.
Yep.
Try something, choose a path, go down that path. And if you find out, a year into that path that's not the path you want to be in, that's not a waste of time. There's a lot of self-discovery in just moving forward towards something. And
just moving.
Starting to see why you don't like an idea or why maybe this path is wrong. There's a clarity that comes through that leads to maybe the choice for the next path or the next idea in a painting that will work out even better because of how far you went down this road.
Absolutely.
And it's just that that comes back to the doing, right?
Yep.
Just, you can't stay still. You have to be moving forward in a direction. You have to make choices and move forward.
Absolutely.
And there's so much self-discovery that comes with that.
Yeah. It reminds me, like when I was in high school, it's going to sound like a Michael Jordan story, but I'm not Michael Jordan at all. But I really wanted to play basketball. I loved it. My mom probably could have played pro. She was a captain of high school. She played a little bit of college. She was a star there. She's the one who taught me how to play. I wanted to play for the Celtics, of course.
Yeah.
Grew up in Massachusetts. And when I tried out my freshman year, they cut me. And I just went to the coach after and I said, I just want to learn how to play the game, because I played street ball, which is different from organized. And he allowed me to come in and play. And I played, and I was the worst one there. But I suffered through it, and I made the team the next 3 years after, because I was dedicated.
Yeah.
There was a point in which my mom was like, you should drop the idea, because you're a 6'1" center on a team that averages about 2 points, that you're going to get drafted by the Celtics. They haven't called yet.
Yeah.
But she was like, why don't you focus on something that you already are good at and put your energy there, and you love art? And that's kind of like where I pivoted. But I always have that experience to pull from of like, I wasn't good at that thing, and it set up the habits and having to kind of fight for everything and the effort that's why I think when it goes to like, why did you come home from polo every day and paint? I'm like, I couldn't not. Like,
Yeah.
it was ingrained in me early because I had that want to get better.
Yeah.
To then go home and just do it. I used to dribble in my basement every day. I used to do jump drills, and I still didn't become great at jumping, or I'm an okay dribbler, but it was like, that was like when I pivoted and took all that stuff over here, I knew kind of like how to just make it, which is just put a little bit in every day, rather than moving nowhere.
Yeah. Mine was, I was a little different. I think I developed my discipline later. Like I always wanted to play basketball, always. And I got to high school and I signed up for a swim class. And, you know, I'm a 15-year-old kid. Now I'm in a class early in the morning with 40 kids, and we're half naked in a pool, and I'm nervous. And like, so the swim coach is the teacher. He tells us, you know, swim across the pool just to make sure nobody's going to drown in his class. So all of us swim across the pool. I didn't know anything about swimming. And he blows the whistle, walks around the pool, stands right over me. He's like, you swim across again. And I'm like, I'm in trouble the first day, right? And I didn't know what's going on. So I swam across again, and he walks around the pool again. He's like, you need to join the swim team. You got to come tonight. And I thought, okay, well, the only reason I signed up for a swim class was I thought maybe it would give me some endurance for basketball season, right? And so I thought, well, swim team will give me even more endurance. So I'll do that. I had a couple of friends a year older than me that were on the team. So fine. So then I show up to swim practice, and now my friend gives me a Speedo, and now that's even more embarrassing. So I'm in the Speedo. I don't know how to flip turn. I've never really used goggles. I don't know how to breathe right. And they say, you know, lane 6 is the slowest, lane 1's the fastest. Just go in lane 6. And I couldn't doggy paddle slow enough. I wasn't trying to go fast because I didn't know anything about it. So then I end up 5-4. I'm in lane 3 the first day, and my friend's in lane 3, and he's like, you know, been swimming since he's 9, and he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing anywhere. Anyways, I end up, the first meet was the night before basketball tryouts, and I end up being the 3rd fastest sprinter on the team. And I still have no idea what times are, or I barely learned how to flip turn. It was the one thing that I was probably, if you want to say gifted in, like naturally gifted in, it was swimming, which is useless or to me, because I wasn't even interested in it, you know? Yeah. And I ended up playing water polo, which was really fun. It was sort of like basketball in a way. I got to use all my basketball knowledge in water polo, which really helped, and got to play a year of college, which was really fun. But I always wanted to play basketball. And the next day I go to tryouts, and I get first cut, because my swim coach went and talked to the basketball coach and said, you know, terrible. Same season, you can't have him. He's a swimmer. So I never got the opportunity. My point with that is that I had this thing that I was really good at innately. And I didn't really want to do it. I didn't have any passion for it. And so I put no effort in. Yeah. And I end up ranked first my whole senior year. And then at state, I took 4th because I just couldn't care about it. I didn't work really that hard. And so then I get to Florence, and I'm studying, and I have this pivotal life-changing moment where I have to figure out if I want to dedicate, because I'm looking back at myself as this sort of lazy swimmer who didn't take advantage of opportunities that may have been there. I could have gone to college and on scholarship and done really well. And I understood that I had missed that opportunity. And so then I looked at this, and I was like, do I really want to make the same decision here and go the lazy route and just have fun with art? Or do I really want to treat myself like I'm worth pulling out my greatest potential, and knowing that that's going to be super hard and lifelong hard. And that for me, you know, I was 26, I was able to take from that previous experience of not dedicating and change and then finally dedicate to something. Yeah. And of course it was easier because I loved drawing and painting, right? I wasn't interested in swimming, but I was definitely interested in drawing and painting. So it was an easier decision, but it still required the acceptance of a very difficult path. You know what I'm saying? Like what we do is always going to be hard. There's certain things that get easier, but there's new challenges constantly. If you're pushing yourself, right?
It's a good story, man. It's good. It says a lot, and I think that's the thing, is that to dig deep and to learn from yourself. That's its own graveyard and rebirth, in a sense of like, I did this one time and I didn't particularly care. Now when I'm going to do something, I'm going to be authentic and really care about it. It's great.
Yeah, I think it's however you find that inner place that you need to get to truly dedicate to something. I think it's important. Whatever it is that you want to achieve, it's a difficult thing to say, I'm all in. I'm going to really push myself towards this.
There's also what's fascinating is it reminds me of I played football in high school, and of course coaches are like, this guy's 6'3", you're 6'3", this guy's 6'1", he has to play football. Like, it's like every time I see somebody who's like 6'8", I'm like, they probably told you have to play basketball, or you get it on the street everywhere you go. That, do you play professional or college?
Yeah.
So I was like told I should play football, and that's why I played it. I didn't want to play.
Yeah.
But we had tremendous success. We won states, and I got a big ass Super Bowl ring upstairs in the studio. But it doesn't mean a lot to me. I mean, the cool thing about it was that as a team, we kind of achieved this thing. Yeah. But I had about the same care as you did, and they were like, "You could be really good at this," and I'm like, I'm 6'1", without a care for this. I don't think the Patriots are going to draft me. Plus, I don't want to go to college, and like, I want to do art, you know? And eventually it kind of like, all these little stories kind of added up of like, I'm not super athletic, but there's a lot of effort in what I do. If I go over and do this other thing in which you have a lot of talent and put the same time and energy and effort into that, then it's like, then it's potent, because you have the drive. And I think that's early where I had that like just drive to be like, I don't care if I make money with this thing. I have to do it, and I'm just going to kind of move with it, which is how I found myself at Water Street. I was in animation before that. I was in illustration before that. And I also almost got a double degree in graphic design and illustration when I was in undergrad. Yeah. So I've just always been all over the place with art, and I still continue to just be interested in different things. You know, once you do the thing, like you do the landscapes, and you know that's like easy to make your kind of bread and butter, it becomes like, well, what's next? Like, how can I find something else to latch onto and move to? Elliot Goldfinger was, do you know Elliot Goldfinger?
I know the name.
Elliot used to run the New York Academy, I think, as a director or sculpting director, and he wrote one of the anatomy books.
Yeah, that's right.
And when I got together with him, I was just like, Elliot, where the heck did you go after that? He was just like, I just always have different ideas, and I just follow them. And he sculpts still, and he was doing sculptures for like the PGA, and that was like his bread and butter. But he was like, I just don't only want to do that. Yeah. And I was like, definitely some kindred spirits there when I was chatting with him.
I think, I mean, as creative people, it's important that you allow yourself the broad thinking, and there's a curiosity that you never want to squash. You want to like retain that forever. And like your love of reading, my love of travel. I also love reading and movies, and I think it just comes with that general curiosity to see more and experience more, and then I want to try it. Like I'm writing a book. I have no business writing a book, but I have these ideas. Yeah. So why wouldn't I? I want to do this TV show. Do it. And it's just, I think it's a good idea. Mm-hmm. I'm really passionate about it. So why wouldn't I? I don't want to have anything off limits. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I've wrote 2 books now, and I never thought I would ever write one. and they didn't come from me wanting to like pursue it.
Yeah.
Ken Salas had written a book with Monticelli, and he knew that I knew Photoshop because I worked at, doing this stuff at Polo every day. And he said, I need help with my illustrations. Can you do them? And I was like, well, yeah, I can do it, because I was a failed illustrator. I was terrible at it.
Yeah.
I wasn't fast. And I was like, I could totally help him and, work through like whatever way in which he's going to articulate like a concept. And when we were working together, he would come over every other week. He was like, you should write a book, because the way in which you help explain it is very solid. And I said, I'd probably do it,
Yeah.
And then something opened up at Monticelli, and they were looking for a still life painter, and he just said, call them right now.
Yeah.
And Ken's like, do it right now, right now.
Right.
He's like, here's a number, call Victoria. And I did it just out of the blue, and blissfully, no idea how to write a book. And I said, what do you guys need? They said a sample chapter, and you need to like, go and do some market research. And I was like, that's kind of cool, because that's the way we do things at Polo, which is see what's out there, see why there's a need for the thing in which you're looking to pitch. And I did all that. But the conversation with Victoria, it was on like a Wednesday, and I was driving to MassArt, because I used to drive 220 miles each way just to teach and then come home the same day. Wow. It was insane. So I was on the road, and I just called her, and I said, yeah, Ken told me to call you. I'm interested in maybe writing a still life book. And she said, okay, can you get me a sample chapter? I said, sure. How does like Monday sound? And she was like,
oh my gosh.
yeah. And I was like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, I don't know. What do you want to buy Monday? And she was like, well, that's funny. Really fast. And I said, okay. But the other thing at the time was like I knew that my wife, we were trying to have our first kid, and we've only got one. And it was kind of like, I know that there's possibly a lot of things that are come down the pipeline if she does get pregnant, and then we have one, then I don't have a lot of time to write this book. So I got it back to her on Monday, and then she sat on the script, because they had to wait for, Mr. Monticelli to come in and then approve it, which took 4 months. But when she accepted it in August, she said, how long do you need? And I almost said, like, I don't know, 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I didn't know anything. I was just like, how long does it take for people? And I had, within that time, like 4 months, I collected a lot of stuff. And I was like, I think I have the book. But then it's like putting it together.
Sure.
They gave me 4 months to write it, and I think I got 5 because my daughter was born at the end, and it was 3 weeks before the last deadline. And then I got 1 more month, and, people spend like sometimes a year or two to write a book.
Of course.
But it was just kind of like, yeah, I'm open to anything. Like, I'll write a book.
Yeah.
You should totally do a book. Yours sounds.
Oh well, I don't. Mine's more of like a self-help on just.
I was gonna say self-help, but
on doing and failure and
you should
trying
do that.
and
that's exactly what I thought about when I read.
I have all these notes and I've broken it up into chapters, but it's just a matter of scheduling the time to do it, which I'm starting to get better at. But
do it.
Yeah, and maybe it'll never get published, but that's not the point of writing it. It's really like I've got a daughter that just turned 21. I've got a 19-year-old son, a daughter that just turned 18. It's stuff that I'm saying to them over and over and over. It's stuff that I've said to students over and over, and it's probably the same advice as the other 1.5 million self-help books, but it's my way of saying it, and so it's.
Here's the thing,
it's a way to get it out.
Yeah, write it and then let the editor tell you if there's a market for it, because sometimes it's just right place, right time.
Yeah.
If somebody came in with an amazing still life book after my book, the publisher's not going to take it because they already have it. The market, it's already there.
Right,
and
right.
The Artist Still Life did really well, so they're not looking to kind of kick their own competition. So just do it. I mean, the art spirit and Hawthorne on painting, even An Evening with Harvey Dunn. I don't know if you ever read that, but
I haven't.
I'll send you the PDF. You can find it online. It's phenomenal. It's just kind of getting in and like listening to what they tell somebody. So it's not so much always writing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the things that teachers say to their students.
Right. It's the notes.
Yeah.
The little quotes, the little thoughts. Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing it. I'm slowly picking away at it. Yeah, tell people. So your book is called The Art of the Still Life.
That was the first one.
And
Yeah.
they can find that on Amazon.
Yeah, they can find it anywhere. I mean, I sell copies.
And it's in the Met.
Amazon. I know.
Right?
I was amazed, but Monticelli has those deals where they're under Phaidon, so they're now distributed by Phaidon, and they were working with the Met before that. So I think Mario Robinson had came out with his book, and I kind of saw all the artists before, and I was like, I would love to be Rob Zeller. Like, I'd love to be in with all these other artists. And if they gave me a chance, hopefully.
Is that what
good.
Patty's
under? Yeah,
Patricia Watwood. Yeah.
Patricia Watwood.
Hers is called The Path of Drawing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ken. Trying to think about Juliet Aristides did 2 books with them. So the publisher originally, I think, worked for Putnam or Watson Guptill.
Okay.
And she had came over because Watson Guptill wasn't doing art books anymore, and Monticelli was like, we do art books, and it's a small like inventory of books that they do, and it just seemed like right, and they do them beautifully. Their books are like. She basically said, here's your contract. We need 208 pages. Yeah. And you see those things and you're like, what the heck am I going to say in 208 pages? Right. Like, I'd probably struggle for 100.
I'm going to have to have a lot of pictures.
Yeah. Full pictures.
Yeah.
But then it was like, and you need 400 images, and it was like all these like checklist of things. And I was like, let's give it a shot.
Sure.
And I gave her way too much.
Yeah.
She wanted 50,000 word count. I gave her 70,000.
Yeah.
And she was like, it's my job to trim the fat, so don't worry about it. And the book ended up being 304 pages because they were like, we couldn't trim the fat. So we're going to take your book and add like another half to it. Like,
wow.
So and it was incredible. And I just put it out there, kind of like what we're saying. The narrative here is just do it. And maybe people hate it. Maybe people love it. I don't know. I always think of Rumi and his one of the poems I always say, or that I quote from him, is that, sing like the bird. I want to sing like the birds sing without a care who listens or what they think.
Yeah.
Just put it out there.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's going to do well. Perhaps it's going to fail. But the fate's not in my hands. I put it out in the world.
Yeah. And there's always going to be an audience because what resonates with you is going to resonate with others.
Yeah.
And what makes sense to you, the way that it makes sense to you, it will find other people that think similarly, and of course it'll find people that don't like it at the same time. But
and they love to go on Amazon.
Yeah, but it's easy. The more successful you are, the bigger your audience is, the more people are going to hate you, right? And that's just an inevitability, and it's almost a sign of success. The more people that despise you, but typically it's the people that aren't doing it, right? It's the people that, I mean, who knows where the trolls come from, but also who cares, right?
I agree.
I think you're not writing for the people that don't like it. You're writing for the people that do. And
it's helped a lot more people than I guess
sure.
It's hurt a few people. I don't know.
Yeah,
like the 1-star reviews on Amazon.
Yeah.
Which are sometimes comical. Of just like, there's not like, you couldn't find one. Like, I could tell you all the crappy books that were heavy.
Yeah.
My book's pretty heavy. It's 5 pounds. And I know every time I have to go ship it. But like, it's at least good for gluing a panel to, a canvas to a panel.
Right.
Like, that seems like it's better than 1 star.
Yeah.
But this sounds like someone like crapped in their coffee and then like tried to sell it to them. It's like, it's even if you don't like what I'm saying, there's at least beautiful still life paintings in it.
Yeah.
But whatever, I think people come around to things later, and if they read what they wrote, they'd probably be a little embarrassed, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird world, the digital world where you don't have to actually confront people face to face.
Yeah, I mean, what was it Oscar Wilde said? Give a man a mask and he'll tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people hide behind social media or on the internet, but they wouldn't say that to your face.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, easy to just type in some crappy comment and whatever.
Yeah, I think, and it shouldn't deter you from doing more, because I think, you know, what you're doing is so valuable. And so you said you've written two.
Yeah, you know, it
What's-
just reminds me of like, I think about it all the time, and I'm like, what would be the number one book of all time? Like, I don't even know. Like, Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. Like, everyone should love
Maybe
that.
the Bible.
That's what I was thinking, like the Bible. But I'm like, once it gets into religion, then you get like crazies. You get crazies on both sides, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna get a lot of 5 stars, and then you're gonna get a lot of 1 of
Sure.
like, this is garbage. But like, that's basically like the way I kind of rationalized it in my head of like, there's not one book that would ever have 5
Yeah.
stars and
No.
1,000% everybody agreed on it.
Yeah.
No way. Never.
Yeah.
It's same with Rotten Tomatoes. If you go on and you look at like, there's no way, no, like you watch this movie and you're like, this is the best movie I've ever
Yeah.
seen. And then you go on Rotten Tomatoes and you're like, it's 65%.
Yeah.
Like, what were those other 35% of people thinking?
Yeah.
Or they just have this like ridiculously high standard of what 5 stars is?
Well, yeah, and it just comes down to taste too, right? Like, there's a lot of people that hate Bouguereau, and there's a lot of people that don't like Sargent, and okay,
Winslow Homer said, I wouldn't go across the street to see a Bouguereau. Did you ever read that quote? He hated him, which I find fascinating to kind of read. And I think Degas had like some crappy quote about Bouguereau too. There was a lot of hatred for him. But then, you know, it inspires a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, you can't please everyone.
No.
I think Cosby. I don't know if you can you quote Cosby.
I don't know.
Safely?
You can Bill Cosby.
Yeah, he said, "I don't know the way to success, but I'm going to mess it up. But the way to failure is to try to please everybody."
Yeah.
Something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's just you accept that you put something out, you hope people like it, and if people don't like it, that's guaranteed. It's guaranteed that people aren't going to like it.
Use it to like glue your canvas to your freaking
Yeah.
panel. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone needs a heavy book for that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it comes anything you do creatively, you'll have an appreciation and you'll have detractors. So
You have to as
just
a painter
accept
too.
it, understand it's going to happen from the beginning, and what does Joe Rogan say? Just don't read the comments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't. And my Victoria said, don't respond.
Yeah.
Like, don't respond to the people on Amazon and
Yeah.
how they feel. I did once recently on Goodreads where somebody just said like something about the new book, the Oil Painter's Color Handbook, and I was like, I just said that like titanium white is everybody says that it's a blue, right? But it's not. It's actually if you were to measure it with a spectrophotometer, not that I even like these conversations about science and things like that, but it's like if you measured it is. It's linseed oil is yellow. And if titanium white, which reflects about 98% of light, you're going to get a yellow film over the top of it. It's yellow when you measure it.
Yeah.
Like the difference between when you add it is a different component of what you're talking about. So you're talking about perception versus actual.
Yeah.
And it's like stupid arguments like this are the ones
Yeah.
that I definitely try to stay out of. But anyway, I just said like, all you have to do is just look at like a Munsell notation notes. I'm not even a Munsell note guy.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you could just measure, like this is
Yeah.
a measurement of a thing. And you can see that Williamsburg has their Munsell notation for titanium white as a yellow-green.
Yeah.
Like that's it. It's not even debatable.
Yeah.
Like if you want to give me 2 stars on a book for that, that's fine. But go
Right.
educate yourself. You know?
Yeah, it's getting into the minutia of things, and it's not necessarily worth arguing about the tiny things. I've gotten a few comments sometimes on the podcast that are feel maybe a little nitpicky or like, did you not hear the rest of the conversation? You've chosen that one thing. I always worry. I've mentioned my sort of path with religion a little bit, and I worry that maybe I've been offensive in my way of talking about it. But also, I'm not going to not talk about my own thoughts because no matter what I say, I'm going to offend someone.
Well, that's Jordan Peterson, right?
Yeah.
How could you not have an opinion about something and offend somebody?
Yeah.
I remember I read one of your comments in the on the Leo interview, and I was like,
yeah,
you said something about being a red state, and it was
yeah.
Okay, what do you do? That's how you feel. Like,
I really wanted this to be, no matter what. When I started doing this, I wanted to make sure that I was uncensored, as uncensored as I could possibly be, without trying to overtly be offensive. I wanted to make sure that whatever conversations I had with people, we both felt like, the cameras aren't on, the mics aren't on. We're just talking like we normally would.
I have great conversations.
So far I feel like we've been able to do that. But no matter what, you're not going to please everybody.
I've had great conversations with, both sides, red and blue, whatever. I don't care. Independents. I'm actually curious. Like I listen to all aspects of politics when I want to get into it. Like Ben Shapiro is fantastic, and Jordan Peterson's amazing, and Steven Pinker is another one that I'll listen to. Sam Harris is great. Yeah. And it's like, you just know that everybody has a bias, and you're just going to listen to it, and then you put it together at the end. And it is what it is. Yeah,
I like hearing it all, and it's one of the things that is becoming less commonplace. Is the sitting down face to face, having conversations, hearing things that might rub you a little bit wrong, but allowing it to rub you so that you can actually think about it.
Absolutely.
What brought a person to the place where they have this thought or have this opinion. And I can take it or leave it.
The serpent that cannot shed its skin must perish. As are ideas that cannot change, or minds that cannot change. They cease to be mind. How could you not listen to a different perspective and then digest it and then have it's all ego first if you just reject it,
Yeah.
I'm all for all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't mean to bring all that up.
No, I mean, I think that's maybe that's a good place to end it. It's a good thought to end it on. Great quote.
Yeah. Well, the other book is the Oil Painter's Color Handbook, and that came out after the Art of Still Life. I'll just wrap it up with that.
That's how I always wrap these up. I want you to whatever resources that you have, where people can find you. So the first book is The Art of Still Life.
Yeah.
And can be found anywhere.
Yeah.
And the second book is
Oil Painter's Color Handbook. And by the way, you were on the roster of people that I was going to possibly put in it. So you'll probably be in one of these books when I do the next one.
Cool.
And the reason why is I love what you're doing with your inventive landscape.
Yeah.
I think it's we should sit down and I want to pick your brain about that because that's fantastic. I mean, that's, one of the things I mention a lot with my students is it's beyond the copy. It's not just we're copying what we're doing. And when you're pulling and inventing, it's such an interest. You have to have a huge well to pull from. Anyway,
you can't invent from an empty reservoir.
And the colors and the sunsets and the purples and stuff like that. The trouble with books is I always have a list of people, and then I have a tight deadline for it all, and I'm always I have to get another person involved, and I have to get them to sign contracts, and then I have to ask them for images in hopes that I can place it in a piece. So sometimes shortening that list, but you definitely were. I was beautiful work, man.
Oh, thanks.
Love your paintings.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then you're on Instagram.
Yeah,
Todd
I'm on
Casey.
Instagram. Yeah, Todd M. Casey.
Todd M. Casey.
Yeah, I put that in there because I got Todd Casey's financial aid my first year of college.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And they took it away because they were you're not that Todd Casey, you're a different one.
Yeah.
So I was all right, I'm not going to have that confusion anymore.
Yeah.
I'll put the M in there.
Okay. So Todd M. Casey on Instagram, and your website?
ToddMCasey.com. I'm on YouTube with some videos. I'll probably be adding more. I'm on Patreon. Patreon's tutorial videos and stuff like that. And I do Q&As on there, talk about color. And
that's something I want to talk to you more about, because I have a Patreon, but I've never done anything with it. I have an account, but
just do it.
Yeah, it's something. I guess my hesitation is the dedication that it would take to. I'd want to make sure I was fair to anyone that signed up, to provide value for that. And having just closed my school, I don't know if I want to jump back into like something I have to do.
Yeah.
But it's certainly something I want to talk about. I know, like, my friend Steve Bauman, does really well with it. He makes some really amazing things. But yes, we'll have to talk about that more. But I do think I've seen some of the stuff that you've been posting, just little snippets. And so I think there's a lot of value in that for anyone that wants to check you out on Patreon.
Yeah, the cool thing about it for me is that even from like business side, and I don't want to always talk like business, but you got to wear that hat if you're trying to make this a living.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like I got the book, and I can either sit and respond to emails all day because I'm going to get a lot of them, which I didn't know. But I've got 2 books now, and there's a lot of questions. Even if you put everything you think imaginable, that there's, well, we don't know, but there will be now a million more questions.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what the tutorials do, is like you can watch the videos, and then you have access to ask me questions, and we can go back and forth, and we'll do live Q&As. And then I'll also bring in like gambling. I work with them a lot. And basically I'm just like, let's talk about how to varnish, because the Unvarnished podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't know how to varnish right. They're pouring it on because they saw it on Instagram, and I'm like,
it's the varnish porn videos.
Yeah. And I'm like, it's not resin.
Yeah.
And the number one thing that like gambling gets is like, the number one question they get is, how come my varnish didn't dry? And you're like, because you poured it on.
Yeah.
So like I have them coming in to kind of talk about mediums, and we did that. We did a studio safety one, and I'm hoping to get other people. Like I've asked Michael Harding, because Michael and I went to Michael and Karen, his wife, to their home when I was writing the Oil Painter's Color Handbook, the new book.
They're in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even know that, but the connection through Trikel, Courtney over there knew Michael, and she was like, because I was like,
I love all those guys.
Yeah, I was talking to like Robert Gamblin, and I chatted with him on the phone a couple of times, which I was like, what an honor for you to even say yes to talking to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was like, he loved it, because he was like, you're asking great questions, and I love that you're like, I had worked with them a little bit on The Art of Still Life, and they were like, they love that book, and they were like, I love what you're doing. We want to help you too. And then it was like, why don't you talk to Robert?
Yeah.
And then I blasted off all my questions, but I was like, I can't just ask one person their opinion, because that's their everybody's got their bias.
Sure.
And the company does what they do. They don't do leads. They do some cadmiums and cobalts, but they're trying to stay away from the toxicity side.
Yeah.
But then I was like, let me get an alternate opinion, maybe 2 other ones.
Yeah.
This goes right back into the kind of red state, blue state, kind of Republican, Democrat. Just getting a consensus in a sense. Sure. See what overlaps and see what doesn't. And that's where Michael and Karen came in, and they were just fantastic. I drove up there a couple of times, had dinner with them, and then ran my chapter through them. Like, what do you think of this? And with that is like, and just like what you're doing here with, I think, your podcast, you learn so much. Yeah. It's not just an interview. It's like, you love to pick people's brain because it makes you probably think differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what they did. They were like, oh, think of it this way. And like, they were always like, if Michael couldn't answer something, he's like, look, I always refer back to Ralph Mayer, the Artist Materials and Handbook. He's like, that's the one. And then also there was a lot of like me asking like, should I put this in a color book? And they were like, that's too technical.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and I think sometimes like that's when you're going to get into trouble, because we have to think about the performance. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do. We're performers, right?
Yeah.
And we're trying to get this tool over here to support that. And then there's people that just go totally over into the science side. Yeah. And then they argue it. And then it's like, it has to be a
balance.
Yeah. Between all of it. And don't lose sight of like, you're a painter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're
you want to be responsible. I look at it like, you want to be responsible to the people that are going to collect your work. You want it to be as archival as possible. You want to be as knowledgeable with the materials. You want it, but ultimately you're just trying to get the things that you can manipulate in the best way to create the visual thing that you're trying to create.
Right. You're just getting control of all
Yeah.
the things. And you could hammer in a nail with a rock. You could do it with a hammer. You could do it with a high-end hammer. You could do it with whatever. You could do it with whatever. You could do it with my Art of Still Life that somebody gave 1 star for, but it's now like a blunt instrument that weighs 5 pounds, and that's what it's good for.
Right.
Like all these things work, and that's the way in which I teach, which is just like, here's a bunch of ideas, and I use them as a tool chest to pull from. There's not one way to paint. Like Florence Academy paints different from Water Street,
right?
And Water Street painted different from the way that I study with Max. But there's a ton of overlap, and then there's a ton of like, well, this is where we break. We're like,
and ultimately, no matter where you go, you still want to retain that individuality and say, here's all the things that make sense to me, but also I'm going to try this. I'm going to do it this way. And that's super important as you're developing as an artist to have the self-confidence and have that as a necessity that you hold on to, that no matter what I ingest from these experiences, I have to make my own way. I have to sort of make my own decisions.
And there's so much in literature that supports that, Sir Arthur, I think in the Round Table, where they all enter the forest at their own spot, because if they entered on somebody else's, it wasn't their path, right? And we have to do that. Eventually you have to break off, and you are you, and you find your interests and what you took from it. Robert Frost, right? I took the road less traveled by, and that made all the difference. I mean, that's really what we're all looking to do, which is express ourselves, express you.
Yeah. And the tools are just there to help you do it more eloquently. That's a good place to stop.
Cool, man.
Thanks you for having me. It was really fun. We're trying to look around. I might end up out here somewhere. I hope so. I have a lot of friends out here, and I'm desperate to have more of these conversations. So hopefully we can land somewhere close.
Yeah, man. I'll have you. I do a little interview series that I just put on Patreon. It's not big. So I'll have you on too. I'd love to pick your brain about your approach too. So
yeah. Cool. And hopefully we'll just keep the dialogue open and talk more.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Good to see you.
You too.
All right. That's it.
Awesome.